In just 48 seconds, one of Britain's most beloved actresses went from smiling graciously to standing up and walking off set, while millions watched in absolute shock. What started as a friendly chat about theater turned into a fiery explosion of accusations, raised voices, and a complete breakdown that left everyone in the studio speechless. This is the story of how Lorraine Kelly pushed Dame Judi Dench too far. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, make sure you subscribe to this channel for daily videos exposing Britain's darkest scandals. You won't want to miss what happens next. Last night's episode of Lorraine was supposed to be a celebration. Dame Judi Dench, one of the most respected actresses in the world, was appearing on the show to talk about her latest project and her incredible career spanning decades. The cameras were rolling live, the audience was excited, and Lorraine Kelly was wearing her trademark bright smile as she welcomed Judi onto the famous orange sofa. "Dame Judi, it's absolutely wonderful to have you here," Lorraine gushed as Judi sat down, looking elegant in a simple black dress. The audience clapped warmly, and Judi gave a small wave and that familiar twinkle in her eye that everyone loves. "Thank you for having me, Lorraine," Judi replied softly, settling into her seat. "It's lovely to be here." For the first few minutes, everything seemed perfectly normal. They chatted about Judi's new stage production, her love of theater, and some funny stories from her time filming the James Bond movies. Judi was charming and funny, making jokes that had the audience laughing. She talked about working with Pierce Brosnan and Daniel Craig, sharing little behind-the-scenes moments that made her seem so down-to-earth despite her incredible success. Lorraine was nodding along, smiling, asking questions that seemed friendly enough. "You've played M in so many Bond films now. Do you have a favorite Bond?" she asked with a grin. Judi laughed. "Oh, I couldn't possibly choose. That would be like picking a favorite child. Each of them brought something unique to the role." The audience chuckled appreciatively. This was the Judi Dench they'd come to see, warm and witty and full of wonderful stories. But then something shifted in the air, something subtle that most people wouldn't have noticed right away. Lorraine leaned forward, and her tone changed slightly. There was a sharpness to it now, a calculated edge. "Now, Judi, I have to ask you about something that's been in the papers recently. There's been some talk about younger actresses saying that your generation had it easier, that you didn't face the same pressures they face today with social media and constant scrutiny. What do you make of that?" Judi's smile faded just a little bit. She paused for a moment, clearly thinking about how to respond diplomatically. "Well, I think every generation has its own challenges," she said carefully, choosing her words. "We certainly faced our own difficulties. Different times, different pressures, but all very real." "But surely you'd agree that it's much harder now," Lorraine pressed, not letting it go. Her voice had an insistent quality to it, like she was determined to get a specific answer. "I mean, young actresses today have to deal with Twitter trolls, Instagram comments, constant judgment about their appearance every single day. You didn't have that, did you?" There was something in Lorraine's tone that felt pointed, almost dismissive, like she'd already decided what the answer should be. Judi straightened up slightly in her seat, and those who know her well would have recognized the warning sign. Her voice remained polite, but there was a firmness to it now, a steel underneath the softness. "We had our own battles, Lorraine. Different platforms, perhaps, but the scrutiny was just as intense. We had newspapers that could be absolutely vicious, critics who could destroy careers with a single review, and we didn't have the ability to respond directly like people do now. We just had to take it and carry on." "Right. But that's not really the same thing, though, is it?" Lorraine said. And now her smile looked more like a challenge than friendliness. Her eyes were harder somehow. "I mean, some people are saying that actresses of your era benefited from a system that was easier to navigate, less competitive. There weren't as many people trying to break into the industry." Judi's eyebrows raised slightly. "I'm sorry. Easier? Less competitive? Have you any idea what it was like for women in theater and film in the 60s and 70s? "I'm just saying what others have said," Lorraine replied quickly, holding up her hands as if she was innocent, as if she wasn't the one choosing to ask these questions. "There's a perception that things have gotten harder, that your generation perhaps had more opportunities handed to them, that doors opened more easily." The atmosphere in the studio was starting to shift. You could feel it, like the temperature dropping before a storm. The audience members were glancing at each other, sensing something uncomfortable brewing. Judi was no longer smiling at all now. She was looking directly at Lorraine with an intensity that was impossible to miss, her eyes focused and unwavering. "Handed to us?" Judi repeated slowly, letting the words hang there. "Nothing was handed to anyone, Lorraine. We fought for every single role, every opportunity. We dealt with sexism, ageism, being told we weren't pretty enough, young enough, thin enough. The only difference is we didn't have a platform to complain about it publicly. We just had to get on with it. Now, I don't think anyone's saying you didn't work hard," Lorraine said, but her tone was patronizing, like she was talking to a child who needed things explained slowly. "But you have to admit that the industry is much tougher now, more competitive, more demanding. There are thousands of girls trying to make it for every role. More demanding than performing Shakespeare 8 times a week while being paid less than our male counterparts? More competitive than auditioning alongside hundreds of other women for roles that reduced us to decorative objects? Really, Lorraine? You think we had it easy?" Judi's voice was rising now, not shouting, but definitely louder, more forceful. There was passion in her words, decades of experience and frustration bubbling to the surface. The camera zoomed in slightly, catching every expression on her face, every flash of emotion in her eyes. This was not going the way Lorraine had planned, and you could see it in her face. She thought she was going to get Judi to agree with some trendy opinion, maybe create a nice little soundbite for social media. Instead, she was getting real resistance, real pushback. "I think you're being a bit defensive," Lorraine said with a little laugh that sounded forced and hollow. "It's just a conversation about how things have changed. I'm not attacking you personally." "Defensive?" Judi's voice was sharp now, cutting through the air. "You're sitting here telling me that my generation had it easy, that opportunities were handed to us, and you expect me not to defend decades of hard work and sacrifice? Decades of blood, sweat, and tears. Those aren't my words. Those are what people are saying," Lorraine countered, still trying to maintain control of the situation, still trying to distance herself from the implications of her own questions. "I'm just the messenger here. Don't shoot the messenger." "Then perhaps you should choose your messages more carefully," Judi shot back without missing a beat. "Or, better yet, not use your platform to diminish the achievements of women who paved the way for the very actresses you're claiming have it harder. We're the reason they have opportunities at all." The tension was thick now, heavy and oppressive. You could have heard a pin drop in the studio. The audience was completely silent, watching this unfold like they couldn't quite believe what they were seeing. Some people were leaning forward in their seats, mouths slightly open. Others were exchanging worried glances. This was Dame Judi Dench, who everyone knows as lovely and kind and funny, looking genuinely angry on live television. It was surreal. Lorraine's face was flushing red, a deep color creeping up her neck. She clearly hadn't expected this kind of pushback, this level of resistance. "I think you're taking this the wrong way," she said, her voice getting a bit higher, more strained. "I'm trying to have an honest discussion about generational differences in the industry. That's what good journalism is, asking tough questions. No, you're trying to create drama by pitting generations against each other," Judi said firmly, her voice steady and controlled despite her obvious anger. "And I won't be part of it. I won't sit here and let you use me to belittle the struggles of women who came before me and those I worked alongside. That's not what I'm doing at all," Lorraine protested, but her voice was getting defensive now too, taking on a whiny quality. "You're putting words in my mouth. I never said your generation had it easy. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, you invited me here under the pretense of discussing my work, and instead you're using me to push some narrative about how easy my generation had it. Well, I'm telling you right now, it wasn't easy. None of it was easy. We worked our arses off." There were a few shocked gasps from the audience at Judi's language, but also some scattered applause. People were torn between being scandalized and being impressed that she was standing her ground. Lorraine's jaw tightened visibly. You could see the muscles working in her face as she clenched her teeth. She was trying to regain control of the interview, trying to steer it back to safer ground, but she'd already pushed too far, and she was about to push even further. "Look, Dame Judi, I respect your career. Everyone does. But I think you're being a bit sensitive about this. It's just a discussion. Surely at your age, you can handle a bit of challenging conversation? You've been through worse, haven't you? At your age. Those 3 words hung in the air like a bomb that had just been dropped, ticking down to explosion. The audience actually gasped. A collective intake of breath. Several people in the crowd whispered, "Oh no!" And she didn't loud enough to be heard on the microphones. Judy's entire face changed. The annoyance, the frustration, it all transformed into something colder, something harder and more dangerous. "At my age?" Judy repeated, her voice dangerously quiet, barely above a whisper but somehow carrying to every corner of the studio. Lorraine seemed to realize she'd made a mistake. You could see it flash across her face for just a second. But instead of backing down or apologizing, instead of trying to smooth things over, she doubled down. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe she was getting instructions through her earpiece to keep pushing for drama. Whatever the reason, what she said next sealed her fate. "I just mean you've been in the industry long enough to have thick skin, haven't you? This shouldn't be upsetting you so much. You're a professional. You've dealt with difficult interviews before. So now, I'm too old to have feelings? Too old to defend myself and my peers when someone disrespects our life's work on national television? Too old to be treated with basic courtesy and respect?" "That's not what I said," Lorraine snapped back. And now she was getting properly annoyed too, her voice rising to match Judy's. "You're twisting everything I say. You're deliberately misunderstanding me. I'm repeating exactly what you said." Judy's voice was louder now, not quite shouting but definitely raised, filling the studio. "You've spent the last 10 minutes telling me my generation had it easy, that we were handed opportunities, that things weren't competitive, and now you're telling me I should just sit here quietly and take it because of my age, because I'm old enough to have thick skin. I never said you had it easy. I said there's a perception." "Oh, don't hide behind other people's opinions, Lorraine. You agreed with every word of it. You're the one asking the questions. Own what you're saying. Have the courage of your convictions." The studio was in complete chaos now, though you couldn't hear it because everyone was frozen in shocked silence, watching like they were witnessing a car crash in slow motion. The producers were probably screaming in Lorraine's earpiece, telling her to go to commercial, to apologize, to do something, anything to fix this. But she wasn't listening. Her face was bright red now, her chest heaving, and her voice was getting shrill and defensive. "You know what? Maybe this is exactly why people say your generation can't handle criticism. I try to have a real conversation, ask real questions that people want answers to, and you can't cope with it. You just get emotional and defensive." "Can't cope?" Judy laughed. But it wasn't a friendly laugh. It wasn't warm or amused. It was the laugh of someone who had absolutely had enough, who had reached the end of their patience. "I've coped with more in my career than you've probably faced in your entire life, Lorraine. I've dealt with real critics, real challenges, real discrimination. I've been told I wasn't good enough, pretty enough, young enough more times than I can count. What I won't cope with is sitting here while you insult me and my colleagues for your ratings." "For my ratings? How dare you?" Lorraine's voice was shaking now. Whether from anger or embarrassment or a combination of both, it was hard to tell. Her hands were trembling slightly as she gripped her note cards. "I've built a career on being honest and real with people. That's what my viewers want, honesty. If you can't handle honest conversation, maybe you shouldn't do interviews." "Honest? You call this honest?" Judy gestured around, her arms sweeping across the set. "You ambush me with loaded questions, dismiss my entire generation's achievements, make ageist comments, and then act like I'm the problem for not playing along? That's not honesty, Lorraine. That's something else entirely. I did not make ageist comments. How dare you accuse me of that? You literally just said 'at your age,' as if being older means I should shut up and accept whatever you throw at me. As if my age somehow disqualifies me from having legitimate feelings about being insulted. That's not what I meant, and you know it. You're deliberately twisting my words." "Then what did you mean, Lorraine? Please, explain to me and everyone watching what you meant by that. I'd love to hear this explanation." Lorraine opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. She was floundering now, clearly trying to find a way out of the hole she'd dug herself into, scrambling for words that wouldn't come. I just thought that someone with your experience would be able to have a more nuanced discussion without getting emotional. That you'd be more professional about this. Emotional. There it is. Judi shook her head slowly, and there was something almost sad in her expression now, underneath all the anger, a disappointment that seemed to cut even deeper. The classic way to dismiss women. We're either too young and inexperienced to be taken seriously, or we're too old and emotional. There's never a right age, is there? Never a right way to exist and have opinions? We're always wrong somehow. Oh, come on, don't make this about sexism, Lorraine said, actually rolling her eyes, which was possibly the worst thing she could have done in that moment. The audience gasped again, louder this time. That's such a cop-out. That's what people do when they can't defend their position. They cry sexism. Don't make this about sexism? You brought me here to discuss how hard young women have it, dismissed everything my generation went through, made comments about my age, called me emotional and too sensitive, and now you're telling me I'm overreacting when I respond with legitimate anger? What else would you call it? What word would you use? I'd call it you overreacting to a perfectly normal interview question. I'd call it you being unable to handle any kind of challenge to your worldview. Normal? Normal? Judi's voice cracked with disbelief, with genuine shock. There is nothing normal about the way you've conducted this interview. You've been rude, dismissive, condescending, and frankly, quite insulting from the moment you started this line of questioning. Lorraine stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor, which made Judi stand up too, almost instinctively. They were both on their feet now, facing each other across the small coffee table, and the cameras were catching every second of it, zooming in and out, capturing different angles. This was live television at its most raw and uncomfortable, millions of people watching from their homes, unable to look away. If you think I've been insulting, then perhaps you're too sensitive for this industry, Lorraine said, and her voice had gone cold now, icy. Maybe that's the real difference between generations. We can handle criticism now. We've evolved. Handle criticism? I've won more awards than you've had hot dinners, Lorraine. I've performed for royalty, worked with the greatest directors in the world, and earned the respect of my peers through decades of dedication and hard work. What I won't do is sit here and be lectured by someone who thinks reading questions off a card makes them an authority on the struggles of actresses. The audience let out a collective ooh at that. Several people put their hands over their mouths. It was harsh, probably harsher than Judi wanted to be. But she'd been pushed to her absolute limit. She'd tried to be polite, tried to be diplomatic, and it hadn't worked. Lorraine's face went from red to almost purple. Her whole body was rigid with anger now. How dare you come on my show and insult me like that? This is my show, my studio, and if you can't show some basic respect, some basic decency, respect? Judi cut her off, her voice rising to match Lorraine's volume. Respect is earned, Lorraine. And you lost mine the moment you started this entire line of questioning. You showed no respect for me, for my career, for the truth, or for any of the women who came before to make this industry what it is today. You wanted drama, and now you're upset that you got it. Then maybe you should leave, Lorraine shouted, finally losing all composure, all pretense of professionalism. Her voice echoed around the studio. If you're so offended, if you hate being here so much, if you think I'm so terrible, then just go. Nobody's forcing you to stay. There was a moment of absolute silence. Complete and total silence. Even Lorraine seemed shocked that she'd said it out loud, her eyes widening slightly as the words left her mouth. The producers were definitely in her ear now, probably screaming at her, telling her to take it back, to apologize, to do something, anything to salvage the situation. But it was too late. The words were out there, broadcast live to millions of people. You can't take something like that back. Judi stood perfectly still for a moment, just looking at Lorraine, really looking at her, studying her face like she was seeing her clearly for the first time. Then, with incredible dignity and grace, she reached down and carefully removed her microphone pack from her dress, untangling the wire slowly and methodically. She placed it gently on the coffee table, not throwing it, not making any dramatic gesture. She just quietly and calmly disconnected herself from the show. "Thank you for having me, Lorraine," she said, her voice quiet but clear. carrying despite the lack of microphone. I hope whatever you got from this was worth it. Judi, wait, I didn't mean, Lorraine started, suddenly realizing how bad this looked, how badly she'd miscalculated, reaching out her hand. Let's just take a breath in, but Judi wasn't listening anymore. She'd made her decision. She turned away from Lorraine, turning her back on her deliberately, and faced the audience instead. She gave them a small, sad smile, the kind that said she was disappointed this was how things had turned out. I'm sorry you all had to see this, she said to them directly, her voice full of genuine regret. You deserved better. You came here for something nice, and instead you got this. I apologize for my part in that. Then Dame Judi Dench, one of the most celebrated actresses in British history, a woman who had performed on the greatest stages in the world, who had won every award worth winning, walked off the set of Lorraine Kelly's show with her head held high. She didn't rush, didn't storm off in a huff. She walked with dignity, with purpose, her posture straight and proud. The cameras followed her as she went, capturing the moment she pushed through the studio doors and disappeared from view, leaving everyone behind in stunned silence. Back on set, Lorraine stood frozen, her mouth hanging open slightly, her arms still outstretched from trying to stop Judi from leaving. She looked around at the audience, at the cameras, clearly in shock at what had just happened. The audience was completely silent. Some people had their hands over their mouths, others were shaking their heads in disbelief. A few people were crying. No one knew what to say or do. The awkwardness was suffocating. One of the producers finally managed to signal for a commercial break, waving frantically from behind the cameras. The feed cut away to advertisements, but for everyone in that studio, time seemed to stand still. But the damage was done. Irreversible, complete damage. In less than 15 minutes, what should have been a pleasant chat between two beloved British figures had turned into a complete disaster. A car crash of an interview, broadcast live for everyone to see. And it was all because Lorraine Kelly couldn't resist pushing, couldn't resist trying to create controversy, couldn't stop herself from going too far. She'd wanted drama, wanted a moment that would get people talking, wanted something that would trend on social media. Well, she got it. She got exactly what she wanted, just not in the way she'd hoped. Not with her as the hero of the story. Dame Judi Dench had walked off her show, live on air, and the whole country had watched it happen.